My travels around Greece as part of this odyssey have taken me from the heart of the nation, Athens, and throughout several of the major island groups. We've cruised around the coast of the Peloponnese and travelled amongst the Ionian Islands. Then we made our way across to the northern Aegean before spending time exploring the hidden gems of the western Cycladic. And man, was it beautiful. This series sees us steering Miazoi further eastward and into the Dodecanese. This episode brings the series to an end as we travel to a place that holds special memories for both Helen and I. It's one of the first islands we visited together when we were young and seeking adventure. I dragged her up mountains, we crawled through tunnels and lived like backpackers. But it was an incredible time, and those memories have kept us coming back again and again. The island I'm talking of is Samos. Now, Samos is one of the islands outside of the Dodecanese that I'm including in this series. It's actually in the northern Aegean, right on the edge of Asia Minor. 1 mile to the east is Turkey, so you can understand why this has always been a strategic piece of land to occupy. One reason I'm so fond of Samos is because of its colourful history, from ancient times to the modern era. However, there's one personality in particular that fascinates me, and that's the tyrant ruler from the 6th century BC, Polycrates. I have to admit something, if I ever had a man crush, it was for him. Not for his despotism, but his vision and engineering exploits.
The ancient Greek world worshipped a litany of gods. And at the top of that hierarchy was Zeus, the god king, and his wife and sister for that matter, Hera, the queen god. Zeus had problems controlling only one god, and that was Hera. Where have we heard that before, Helen? Hera made her base here in Samos. We're in Pythagorio, the ancient town of Samos, and it's here in the 6th century when Samos was at its height. Pilgrims would come from all over the world to worship Hera in her temple. And Polycrates made this city, this island, the peak island of all of Greece. He built a beautiful mole that went out for 500 metres, and it was 60 feet deep for his 120 ships and his 1,200 bowmen, his archers that protected this beautiful town of Pythagorio. I loved him. I love Polycrates. I've been following him for 2 decades. He's my favourite ruler. He's my favourite leader. Yes, he was a tyrant, but you know, we've got tyrants today. And in 1,000 years' time, they'll say he was a conqueror and he was a great guy, just like we say about Polycrates. I love this island. I've come back here 2 or 3 times and I look forward to seeing it again with you guys.
If Pythagorio sounds familiar, it's because the town is named after the mathematician and philosopher Pythagoras. We all learn about his theorem in high school. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. But there was so much more that he gave humanity. He was a brilliant philosopher and teacher, connecting music with mathematics, researching his observations and turning them into principles that allowed us to better understand the world. There's not a person on the planet that hasn't been touched by his work. Of similar ilk was Polycrates. His exploits may not have spread across the earth, but they were incredible in their own right. During his reign, Samos was at its prime. He fortified the island at a scale that had never been seen before. He developed engineering and technological expertise that enabled Samos to become the superpower of the region. He constructed a deep-water mole that was 400 metres long to protect his fleet. He dug an aqueduct over 1 kilometre in length to supply drinking water to his people. And to keep his troops and the populace safe, he made kilometres of massive stone walls that still exist today.
As a newlywed, I convinced my wife Helen to climb this mountain through thistle and brush just to see these walls, the walls of Polycrates. She didn't whinge once. 3 decades later, they've created fire trails and I came up by 4-wheel drive. But there's a special reason for coming up here. These walls are almost 6.4 kilometres long. Look how wide they are. It was a mammoth effort, around 530 BC, 6th century, for Polycrates to build these walls and create the empire that he had created. And this is just a symbol of what Samos was, the height of Samos. And I love it, and I could come up here again and again and again.
The thick walls were built with limestone, quarried on the island and then put into place using mostly slave labour. It's said that there was once a moat in front of it, dug by Milesians and Lesbians that Polycrates captured during a battle. The story of his exploits and much of the history of Samos were penned by the historian Herodotus. He writes in detail about Polycrates' life. However, the telling of his demise is somewhat less thorough. In essence, Polycrates was deceived by a Persian governor, Oratus, and assassinated on a visit to Magnesia. Herodotus describes it as an unfitting end for a glorious ruler. As a break from all the history lessons, I took a walk on the northwest of the island, and it was one of those hikes that you never forget.
Yorgo, what's unique about this forest?
In this forest, you can find a lot of endemic flowers and herbs, and also you can find a lot of animals, special animals, like jackals, chameleons, and that is the unique thing.
Wow, jackals.
Yeah.
Awesome.
The island really does have everything. I've never heard of jackals and chameleons being here. It just goes to show you that you never stop learning. However, the chances of seeing one are pretty slim, as they're cunning little critters.
This is a massive green canopy. You must get a bit of rain here.
Yeah, during the winter it rains a lot. For example, this January and December we had almost a record in the rainfall in Samos, around 1 meter.
1 meter of rain in 2 months.
Yeah, almost
Wow.
every day, hard
Wow.
rain.
Well, that's why you've got the waterfalls here.
Yeah, of course.
So there's 3 waterfalls here in Potami, right?
There are 3 waterfalls, and to see the waterfalls you have to swim, to go inside the water.
Well, I brought my swimmers with me, mate.
Perfect.
Most people don't realise that a lot of the larger Greek islands have quite diverse ecosystems. There's much more to them than beaches and olive groves. The interiors of many of them are filled with rainforests, waterfalls and wildlife. The best thing is, often it's easily accessible too.
I love these walks, Yorgo, because they're good for people like me that don't want to go on long walks, you know? 15 minutes and then we're there. Awesome. I love it.
It's perfect for all the people, yeah.
The bubbling water and shady canopy made this part of Samos much cooler than the coast. It had a calmness about it, and despite being so beautiful, it seemed as though no one else knew it existed. We didn't see a single soul the whole time we were out there.
Here we are, Panagiotis. In this place we have to get wet now.
Oh, man. And what, there's 3 waterfalls up
There
there?
are 3 waterfalls here and we'll go to sea.
Let's go. Better start stripping off here.
We might have only been a kilometre from the 25 degrees Celsius beach water, but this mountain stream was significantly colder. After a hike, it was quite invigorating, but came as a bit of a shock. Discoveries like these are why I keep coming back to Samos and the Greek islands in general. There's always something new and exciting to be found. All you need is a little bit of local knowledge and an adventurous attitude, and in this case, some bathers, and you never know what you might discover. The water was refreshing in more ways than one. It gave me a burst of youthful energy, taking me back a couple of decades to when I first traversed this countryside with Helen. I might have aged a little and now find it more of a challenge to scale the mountain trails, but I'm still young at heart.
Πάμε για καφέ.
Πάμε για καφέ
Έλα.
πάνω.
Coffee time. Man, check this out.
The perfect way to finish a hike and a swim is with a nice cup of Greek coffee. It's pretty cool that there's a tavern right next to the waterfall. The only downside is to get to it, you have to scale a rickety old staircase out of the gorge.
All the creeks, I can hear all these creeks. For an island that had one of the best engineers, I'm not too sure if they carried the genes right through. Man, it's dangerous. Not even plumb. No steps the same. looks like it's ready to collapse.
All I can say is, if Polycrates was here today, this thing would be made from marble and 6 feet wide.
Oh, man. Bummer. I'm pretty sure they used that on an Indiana Jones set. It's that bad. Café. We need café.
Yes, my lord.
What a great reward for the effort. In the middle of nowhere, there's this awesome little spot with mountain views and fantastic coffee. Of course, we had to celebrate it with an ouzo as well.
It's a taverna too. He makes lunch and dinner. Does he make dinner?
Lunch, dinner here, yeah. And a lot of people, they visit during the day.
Costa and Manoli that own the place, they built it.
Kostas, he built everything here, and also Kostas, it was the person that created the first bridges and give the access to the waterfalls
Oh, is that right?
during the 90s.
Is that right? So they built those accesses through. A lot of vision. It works for them. I think it's an awesome place. I mean, it's beautiful, but I don't know if I want to stay here for long. If there's a bit of an earthquake, it looks like it's been put together very, not the best way, mate, you know? But I tell you, I've had a good time today, Jorg. I really appreciate it. Sinias, mate. Yamas.
For as long as I can remember, this place has always looked like it's just been through a cyclone. And as rickety and precarious as it all appears, the stairs and buildings stand firm. Well, maybe not firm, but let's just say they're still here. As you'd have noticed, Samos is green and hilly. This is Mount Kerkis, the second largest mountain in the Aegean. It's here that Pythagoras had his secret school, far from the establishment, hidden in one of the many caves.
Follow the red marks. Now, I didn't realise Pythagoras was an acrobat. Wow.
The trail is well marked, but it's not so easy getting up here, especially when you're lugging a ton of camera gear that's required for a production of this scale. It's a good thing I've got such a fit and healthy team. I'd have lent a hand and carried some of the equipment, but well, I have no excuse.
I made it. 4 kilometres from Cambos, up into Kerkis Mountain, and here I am. I've been waiting for this. Pythagoras, thinker, philosopher, mathematician, way ahead of his time, not accepted by the autocracy. He had to flee the persecution of Polycrates in this cave, one of 50, but the only one that was dry because it was ventilated from 2 sides. I can just see him sitting here with his students, teaching them that advanced geometry that had never been heard of. But this was it. This was his last moment in Greece. He left here and he fled to southern Italy. The Greeks never saw him again.
This was a powerful moment for me. I stood in the cave silent, knowing that one of the greatest minds to have ever lived would have once been in this very place, sharing his words of wisdom. And although Pythagoras was forced to leave Greece some 2,500 years ago, I felt like it happened yesterday. I don't know how to describe the sensation, but let's just say it was as though I'd just lost a mentor that I never got to meet. Few people have had as much impact on history as Pythagoras, and his influence will continue well into the future for centuries to come. Heading to the port on the main street of Logotheti, take a right a couple of streets before you hit the water, follow the sounds of the bouzouki echoing down the walkway, and you'll eventually come across one of Samos's special personalities.
When I think of Greece, or anyone thinks of Greece, the first words that come to mind are Acropolis, Greek islands, and bouzouki. Why is the bouzouki such an important instrument in Greece?
It's not only that it is important, it is a beautiful instrument, okay? The sound of it is bright, it's beautiful, and we are very proud of it for one reason also. Because we created this instrument and we gave to the West the Eastern music.
I did not know that.
We are the carriers of the ancient times, not the Turks and the others. They are East.
Yep.
They have they kept the early Byzantine music or the late ancient Greek music with quarter of tones. We made it semitone, tone, semitone, tone, and we put all this knowledge that we had, all these thousands of years, we gave it to the West.
Wow.
This is the most important part about the bouzouki. I'm playing professionally 46 years.
46 years.
I bought a bouzouki when I was 24 years old.
And you haven't stopped playing?
No.
Do you play every day?
You have to.
So you make the instruments, you design the instruments as well, you write songs, you write music, you've been playing the bouzouki, you teach the bouzouki. What is there left to do? You have everything there, haven't you?
No, I have to keep going on.
Yeah?
Yeah, I have to still create.
Yeah? Will you be playing the bouzouki forever until you...
Yes, as long as I can.
As long as you can.
Σαμιώτησα, σαμιώτησα, πότε θα πας στη Σάμο. Σαμιώτησα, σαμιώτησα, πότε θα πας στη Σάμο. Ρόδα θα ρίξω στο γυαλό, σαμιώτησα, γαρίφαλα στην άμμο. Ρόδα θα ρίξω στο γυαλό, σαμιώτησα, γαρίφαλα στην άμμο.
Spending a day with this craftsman and passionate musician was beyond entertaining. It was inspirational. Not just for me, but my son Irenaeus too. He was so fascinated by Yanni and his music that he stayed behind and started to learn how to play. Once back in Australia, he remained in contact with him and now has a weekly lesson over Skype. Yanni has brought Greek music into my son's life, and I can't thank him enough for this cultural enlightenment. This is yet another experience that reinforces my belief that travel, especially to places connected with your heritage, is a wonderfully powerful thing. It brings a sense of place in the world. It opens your eyes to the past, which in turn helps you feel at home in the present.
Και με τα μαύρα σ' αγαπώ και με τα λερωμένα.
Knowledge gathered via hands-on experience is the best form of education. It not only goes for things like the arts or practical skills, but history and philosophy too. Take this next place I went to. It was seeing these ruins in the flesh that motivated me to dig deeper into their origins. I discovered that this site was dedicated to Zeus's wife, Hera. She was the goddess of marriage and birth. It's called the Horion of Samos, and the historian Herodotus claimed it to be the largest of the known temples of ancient Greece. It was built in various stages, starting in the 8th century BC, culminating 300 years later when Samos was at its peak. Little remains of it today, but you do get a sense of the grand temple that once stood on the now crumbling foundations.
First of all, this pillar always existed. It's been here for the past 2,500 years, so we always knew how big it was. But just so you can understand it, this was like an 8-story building. It was 25 meters tall. So it was a massive structure for its time.
So what inspired you? Why did you want to dig here? What is it?
Well, this is one of the oldest sanctuaries that we have throughout the whole of Greece, so it might not look as overwhelming as the Parthenon, but this is where everything starts. So this is where religion starts between the East and the West. And the first people that came here 5,000 years ago.
5,000 years ago? Wow.
This was the third of the great engineering feats on Samos that Herodotus wrote of. In many ways, it symbolises the prosperity of the island. No other Greek island possessed something of such grandeur and opulence. It was a statement of power and wealth for both Samos and Polykrates.
Those people, the temple was just not the centre of religion. It was a way to attract people. You know, you have the biggest temple, more people would come. But the centre of religion was always outside where they would sacrifice. Sacrificing was everything for these civilizations.
That's all religio stuff. For me, big deal. What I love is the engineering. I mean, these guys were building an 8-story building at the time. And sure, he had engineers, local Samos engineers, but it was Polykrates, wasn't it? He was the one that created this. He's the one that created all these engineering... Why are you laughing?
You're seriously obsessed with Polykrates.
Yeah.
Polykrates was a tyrant. It was a political system. He could be good, he could be bad. He was very ambitious.
Yeah, but if it wasn't for him, it wouldn't have happened, right?
He had very good engineers. This was the engineer Rico and Theodore, and the other one that he brought was Eupalinos. But yes, you're right.
Yeah.
He wanted to build the biggest temple the Greeks have ever seen, and that's exactly what
So he had a
vision.
had a bit of a phallic problem,
Yeah,
right?
he had a phallic.
Most tyrants and leaders, we know some today that are a bit like that as well.
What makes this even more important is that unlike the port or aqueduct that were built for militaristic purposes, or a fortress that might have existed to protect the masses, this was a sanctuary dedicated to a mythical god. This meant it was given even greater consideration and became the most important project on the island. If you ever find your way here, I implore you to just stand on one of the column bases and try to conceptualise the scale of what was built here. I can tell you now, there's nothing like it anywhere in the world. Behind the port is a mountain range that dominates the landscape. It's here that my favourite site on Samos lies, the Tunnel of Eupalinos. It's a feat of engineering that was well ahead of its time and still amazes me to this day.
Irene, you know I'm super excited.
I know you are.
Super excited. I'm going to walk in first. That's how much I'm excited. Irene, this is a bit tight.
I know.
It's not made for people
It's made
my
for
size.
people like my size.
Yeah, I know. Oh man, this is tight. Now, it's a little bit tight here. Not the best for the claustrophobic, but...
The conditions down here weren't as claustrophobic as you might think. The air was cool and the tunnel well ventilated. Plus, having a fantastic guide in Irene meant I spent the whole time talking and learning about how they were built and their purpose.
I can handle it for my passion for engineering.
And also a shaft up here,
Yep.
which has some light.
Right, okay. So, Denny, this is the actual aqueduct down here, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
And this was basically the service tunnel.
The service tunnel.
So this is what they looked down there and the water ran down there. So many years ago, the water would be running down there.
In a terracotta pipe. So
Wow.
literally 2 tunnels.
Two tunnels?
Yeah,
Amazing.
one on top, one on the bottom.
Wow. They were way ahead of their time, weren't they?
They were.
We should keep moving, eh? It's a kilometre, this, eh? There was no machines back then, right? So this was all done
Man-made.
by hand. What was the labour story?
4,000 war prisoners from the island of Naxos did all the digging in here, and their reward was that whoever come out alive would go back to Naxos as a free person. So from the 4,000, only 350 came out alive, according to Herodotus.
Wow.
Yeah.
Only 350.
A lot of people were lost for the water of this city.
And how long was this tunnel used for?
This was used for over 1,000 years. It was an active tunnel that gave water to the city for about 1,000 years.
Unbelievable. This is the bit I love. This is the bit I love. Irene, not only was it difficult to build the tunnel, all that labour, but it's come into two
Both
sections.
sides,
What's the
yeah.
story? What's the story?
Okay, so we don't exactly know why. Maybe to make work quicker, they started digging on both sides and they actually met in the middle. This is the junction point, 1/2 metre of distance. They originally fell off 7 metres, but they realised their mistake and they managed to save it. And this is the point where both tunnels...
But literally at right angles.
Yes.
And they didn't have surveying instruments like we have today. No theodolites, none of that.
No, they had a triangle.
Yeah.
That was what we believe that they used, the 3 steady points.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it.
And what's the motto of the story? Use Greek builders. Let's keep going. The Romans were known for their advanced engineering and construction techniques. From roads and bridges to aqueducts, they certainly achieved remarkable feats. But this tunnel was built well before the Roman period and was one of the first, if not the first, subterranean aqueducts of this scale to have been built from opposite sides. The sad thing is, over 3,500 people died in its creation. I guess one positive from all that sacrifice is the legacy that it left. Thousands of years later, people still walk through the place in wonder. Samos is the 9th largest island in Greece, about 480 square kilometres in size, so there's plenty to be explored. Coincidentally, it's also the 9th most populous, with close to 34,000 people calling it home. Apart from the great climate, it's also one of the sunniest places in Europe, so you can understand why it's so popular for tourists. You're almost guaranteed perfect weather. Through the interior you have mountains, plains and plenty of vineyards. Muscat is the grape of choice, but there's also olives, honey and almonds, amongst other things that are produced on the farms. Along the coast are countless beaches, which provide a bit of respite from the heat. It also gave poor Helen a break from all the history lessons I was giving. Apart from taking the family along to all the sites I visit, they also have to listen to me spouting all my facts and figures during breakfast, lunch and dinner. So a visit to the main town of Vathi with a few swim stops along the way was a welcome relief. Being one of the major towns on the island, Vathi is a hub for tourists. This is where you generally first arrive on Samos, and to be honest, you don't have to spread your wings too far from here. There's plenty on offer to keep you entertained with quiet beaches, restaurants, cafes and museums. You could easily base yourself in town and enjoy the convenience of having everything at your doorstep, then hire a car or get a water taxi to explore more of the island. One thing to keep in mind is that it's a sprawling development that rises up the hillsides. So with all that sunny weather they have, it can make walking around town during summer a bit of a challenge.
A side trip to Vathi is well worth it, if only to see the archaeological museum and some of the votives that lined the sacred way, one in particular.
Wealthy pilgrims from across Greece would come to the sanctuary of Hera, bringing with them handcrafted marble offerings. If they were lucky, it would be placed as a votive on the sacred way. The most popular offering was a statue known as a kouros. Most have been lost to time or destroyed by the ruling powers that have come and gone. However, there's one of the largest of its kind housed at the museum.
This fellow is the tallest freestanding kouros from antiquity. And you can tell that he's a votive or an offering because on his left thigh you can see an inscription from the family that offered him to the god Hera. Now this kouros, he's my favourite, not because he's the tallest, because if you look closely, he's smiling. And you look at this kouros and the more you look at him, the more detail you can see from the meniscus of his knee right through to the buttocks and the shape of the buttocks with the veins of the marble. Now, what is a kouros, you say? Kouros means young boy in Greek, a young boy of noble descent. And the kouros was an offering to the gods. You'll see them all over Greece. This is specifically from antiquity. I just love looking at him.
Standing next to this towering figure, you get an appreciation for the scale of work that went into making it. Not only carving all the details, but also quarrying of the right block of marble and the enormous exercise of delivering the statue during the various stages of production. It took both great engineering skills as well as artistic prowess to bring such a wonder to life. There are some things in life I'm willing to say that I'm pretty good at. Construction, for instance. but I'm also more than happy to admit that there's plenty of stuff I'm just hopeless at, like choosing a good wine from a bad one. I know what I like, it's just that often what I think is awesome doesn't rate amongst the enthusiasts. But one thing I'm confident in saying is that Greek wines hold their own. Miazoi is stocked with the stuff, and all my guests love it.
Centrally and to the north part of the island is this beautiful town of Vourliotes, and it's surrounded by vineyards. I'm about to meet someone that's going to tell me why these vineyards have two unique qualities that you won't find anywhere else. I'm really looking forward to it.
In ancient times, Greece was famed for its fantastic wine, but through much of the 20th century, it became the opposite. However, the last couple of decades have seen a resurgence in its quality and therefore popularity to international buyers. Nowadays, you'll find an award-winning Greek wine in some of the top restaurants around the world and in my cupboard at home. The best thing is, not only does every island produce its own varieties, but it's also generally inexpensive. So when you spend a couple of euros on a glass of red at a tavern, you're usually supporting the local growers and can be sure you'll be drinking something pretty good. To help broaden my understanding of Samian wine, I met with Huiti, the heritage director of the House of Metaxa.
And you see over there the terraces, the pezoules that we've discussed.
Yeah.
These are quite old. They can be even 500 to 600 years old.
Right.
But the vines here are relatively young. They are, I think,
I can see the grapes here.
Yeah,
Look at
they're young, they're young.
How many vineyards are there here in Samos?
Let's say how many farmers or vine growers are in Samos. There's not a single person in Samos or a single family who doesn't own a vineyard. So it's quite rare that you meet a Samian and says, I have nothing, I don't have a property, I don't have a vineyard. So it goes from, generations. You inherit your vineyard from your grandfather, great-grandfather, all the way to your father. And for the locals, it's also a sign of pride. It links to their tradition, to the heritage of the family, so they will keep the vineyard at any cost.
How many farmers are there then?
Let's say today, part of the cooperative of Samos, there must be around 3,500 people.
And it's a cooperative, they all work together.
Well, the reason why the cooperative was founded is because back in the days, and the cooperative was founded in 1934, back in the days the European merchants would come on the island and buy from every farmer, every vine grower, and the vine growers at the point decided to come together in order to be able to negotiate better prices. At the same time, by forming the cooperative, what they managed to do is to protect the quality of the grape and thus of the wine, improve it through time, and be able, of course, to make a little bit of profit out of it.
What is it that keeps them all together for the last 80 years?
You cannot have a vineyard in Samos and work it on your own, because cultivation and everything that's linked to the cultivation of the Muscat has to be done by hand. You see how it is. You cannot have a pickup truck, you cannot have anything that's it's a machine, let's say equipment. So what happens is that you need to be part of a community, and the people will work with the family, with their friends, and that's something that you see a lot during harvesting, because harvesting needs to happen quickly, within a day or two, and it's impossible for one person, one farmer, to do it on his or her own. So they need to rely to their family and friends. And what the Samians say is, during harvesting, everyone on the island works for the harvesting. So people from the age of 5 to the age of 85 will come here, will come to their own vineyards, harvest, and then the next day when they're done, they will go to the neighbor, to the friend, to the family member and help them out. So that's how...
I think it's awesome. I think it's
really
awesome.
Awesome.
There's 3,000 families that have got a sustainable future for a long, long time, and each one works on their own, and they're still part of a major brand at the end of the day, or major brands.
It's so impressive that a cooperative of 3,500 families can all work together in such a united way. I love the fact that they all pitch in at harvest time, helping each other to gather the crop, ready for production. It's a case of understanding that the sum of all their efforts far outweighs what an individual can achieve in isolation. It's something you rarely see in this day and age.
I'll share a story with you. It's, Metaxa is a brand that's, international, and you will find it everywhere in the world. And I have had people from the island telling me how proud they feel when they go in an airport let's say Frankfurt or Melbourne or Sydney, and they will find a bottle of Metaxa, and they know that part of their whole homeland is there, sitting
fantastic.
on a shelf in a duty-free shop in Sydney or Melbourne. That's amazing, and you know, it gives me the goosebumps.
Me too, me too.
It gives me the
Well, you know,
goosebumps.
so much so,
They say-
I want to go and taste it now. Can we go and taste it?
Yes, of course.
Let's go.
Let's go.
Thank you.
There's no big business or corporate structure driving a commercial winemaking machine here on Samos. It's all about sustainable community-based viticulture, where the end result is a high-quality drop, well-known in Greece and exported around the world. Other than wine, they also use the grapes in the making of Metaxa. It's a sweet amber spirit, a little bit like brandy, that's been made in Greece since the late 1800s. It's the perfect after-dinner beverage, so I might just have to grab a couple of bottles to put alongside the wine collection back on the boat. But first, I need to learn more about it.
Costa, I knew that Samos was famous for its sweet wines,
Yes.
but I didn't know Metaxa came from here. And how long has it been here for?
Yes, actually, Metaxa is not coming from here, but is based on Samos sweet wine.
Oh, right,
From
okay.
the beginning. The story of Metaxa is strongly related to Samos sweet wine.
Do they get grapes from Samos nowhere else in the world?
No, we get, for that kind of the wine, for sweet wine, we get grapes from Samos. But apart from Samos Muscat wine, we are using distillates as well.
Right, okay.
Wine distillates. Those distillates are coming from other places.
Okay, so in 131 years, there have only been 5 masters.
Exactly.
How long have you been a master for?
I have been for 26 years.
26 years?
Continuously, of course.
So what about the next master? Are you preparing the next master?
Yes, we have found the next Metaxa master. Of course, I'm training him because we need to train him for years.
Yes.
To be sure for their ability for the future of Metaxa, of course.
And so you're a master. That means you hold the secret recipe.
Yeah.
Nobody else has it.
Nobody else. Of course, I'm trying to have everything written for safety reason.
Right.
But I decide only for the recipe.
Wow.
Yeah.
Metaxa is a blend of brandy, muscat and botanicals that's aged in oak barrels. The number of years it spends in the cask determines how many stars it gets. It's usually sold as 3, 5 or 7 stars, but Costantino has created a 12-star version.
So, you see, first of all, the color is dark amber. Huh?
Much darker than the 5-star.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, because of the aging, because and you feel in the nose, you feel a lot of dried fruits.
Yes.
Mature fruit, but dried fruits like dried fig, dried prune, black raisin, chocolate.
Wow.
Spices, a lot of sweet spices, and the orange peel at the end.
Yeah, that's very different to the 5-star and 7-star. Very different. It's like a different alcohol, isn't it?
Yeah.
So how many bottles of Metaxa are produced yearly?
11 million.
11 million?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, let's drink some. Sniyasu.
Στην υγεία σου.
This is awesome. You've done a great job. Bravo.
Thank you.
Bravo. That's why you're the master.
Yeah, that's my job.
That's your job.
In the early 1900s, at the time when Metaxa was taking off, there were other trades on the island that were flourishing too. In the town of Karlovasi existed a thriving tannery and tobacco manufacturing industry. It meant the population boomed, with plenty of work and wealth to be shared. It's evident in the remains of the huge factories and neoclassical mansions that were built at the time. When those industries collapsed shortly after the end of World War II, the town was largely abandoned. But in recent years, it's been reinvigorated thanks to the University of the Aegean being placed here. A walk through the old part of Karlovasi and along the bay takes you past numerous grand houses and churches. You'll also find the tannery and folklore museums, as well as a Venetian castle. Plus, just a short trip from town takes you to the waterfalls of Potami and some sensational beaches. It's a popular part of the island for those that love architecture, as well as young people who are now breathing some life back into it. They bring with them energy and creativity, which is reflected in the bar and cafe scenes, as well as the street art that adorns many of the walls.
1 week just wasn't enough. We're here on our last night in Kratá Bay, which in English means Dawn Bay. We learnt so much here. We learn about Hera, the god queen. We learn about Polycrates, the tyrant. We learn about Pythagoras, the mathematician and visionary. We walked through forests to waterfalls. We ate extremely well, and we sat on beaches and halarosame, as the Greeks say, lying on those beautiful beaches here in Samos. And I look forward tomorrow to waking up to this wonderful sunrise here in Kratá Bay.
This was actually the end of our summer in Greece filming this series. In a few days, I was due home. In the last few weeks, we travelled through several spectacular and culturally rich islands. But it was only now, when things finally slowed down a little, that I had a real chance to look back at everything and fully appreciate what we had seen and done. It was an incredible time where I learnt, laughed, made new friends, connected with old ones, and enjoyed numerous fabulous meals along the way. The sun was setting on this leg of the journey. I had one final day before boarding my flight home, and I was going to make the most of it. So with that in mind, we made our way across to the tiny islet of Samiopoula for one last swim in paradise. In the next series, I return to complete my time in the Dodecanese, starting in Kos. From there, I'll be travelling throughout the southern islands of the group, including Tilos, Simi, Karpathos, Kassos, and all the way down to Castellorizo. As you'll discover, the region is as diverse as it is fun, with great characters, fantastic cuisine, and even better history. There's beautiful scenery and gorgeous beaches, and what's more, being so close to Turkey, it has plenty of influence from Asia Minor. Each destination has its own unique attributes, but there's one thing I think they all have in common, and that's some of the best sunrises and sunsets you'll find anywhere on the planet.